Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October installment of our VSA webinar series, which comes to you from the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts and addresses topics related to the arts and special education. I'm Emily Thiel, the Program Coordinator of Special Education here at the Center, and I will be your webinar moderator. Today's webinar is part of our Lightning Talk series, Voices from the Field, Transition, and the Arts. If you would like to view live stream captioning of this webinar, you can follow the link you see on this slide and in the chat box of the control panel located on the right side of your screen. Before we get going, I'd like to take a brief moment and introduce you to Cisco WebEx Event Center. Broadcast messages from the Kennedy Center team, such as the link for live stream captioning, appear in the chat box, which you can select from the control panel on the top right of your window. If you need to leave the webinar early, you leave it by clicking the X in the upper left corner. A recording of today's webinar will be available afterwards, so you can catch up on any parts you missed. You can connect to the audio portion of the webinar through your telephone or through your computer's microphone and speakers. Select the option that works best for you. If you are using a telephone, please make sure you mute your computer speakers. You can submit comments, questions, or answers to questions using the Q&A option, which you can select from the top panel. Please note that this is different from the chat box and allows moderators to view your questions. Please make sure that your question is directed to all panelists. I will monitor the screen throughout the webinar. If you prefer to speak your input rather than typing it, please click on the Raise Your Hand icon, which can be found on your view on the participants panel. I will touch base with you and unmute your microphone at the appropriate time. Much of today's presentation will be conducted over a screen share. If you would like to adjust your view by zooming in or zooming out, you may click on the magnifying glasses. You may also expand your view to full screen. At the end of today's presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions about the material. Given the very limited amount of time available to us, we respectfully ask that you avoid questions about individual students and focus questions on the broader implication of Ramona's work. During this open-ended question and answer time, please raise your hand if you wish to speak or type your question into the Q&A box. Within the week, we will send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's presentation, a copy of the PowerPoint, and a copy of the webinar transcript. This means that you can go back and watch the recording and review supplemental materials in addition to any notes you take during the webinar itself. Our next Voices from the Field, Transition in the Arts Lightning Talk will take place on October 31st at 12:30. The registration link can be found in your chat box. If you are active in social media, I invite you to connect with us using hashtag VSAWebinar. On Facebook, we are VSA International. And on Twitter, we are VSAINTL. We would love to engage with you. And with that, I hand it over to today's presenter, Ramona.
Thank you very much, Emily. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, PowerPoint. Okay, wonderful. All right, everyone. Welcome to Inclusive Arts Education Strategies to Engage Learners of All Ages and Abilities. A moment so I can start to present. Oh, my presentation button is gone. Oh, here it is. Okay, my name is Ramona Burns. I am the founder of Hands-On Folktales. If you want to engage with me on social media, you can contact me on Twitter through @HandsOnFolktale to find us. If you'd like to discuss what we're learning about today, you can use the hashtag storytelling or hashtag HOFstory if you'd like us to be able to be a part of that conversation. Overview. Today we're going to talk about the universal design for learning and theory of multiple intelligences, building a safe space in our classrooms, voting and group expression, which is really how the student gets to take ownership of the process, interdisciplinary arts, and we'll have a question and answer section. So the Universal Design for Learning and Theory of Multiple Intelligences. It's a mouthful. What does it mean? UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. When we talk about the UDL, we consider the learning style of each individual student and their interests. So when we talk about what we're learning, we are offering multiple means of representation. When we talk about how we're learning it, we are offering multiple means of action and expression. And why? Why should the student be invested in the process? We are going to offer multiple means of engagement and motivation. So we've said multiple a lot. And what does that mean? How can I offer multiple means of representation when I'm teaching 2+2? And that's when we check into the theory of multiple intelligences. There's a list on the left, and those are the different ways that kids can engage in learning. So the theory of multiple intelligences says we can use music, linguistics, bodily kinesthetic, spatial, naturalist, logical mathematical, interpersonal, or intrapersonal, so working with self or working with a group to engage students in learning. Now I have a list of art forms on the right, and I want us to see how many of the theory of multiple intelligences we can check off by just engaging in art projects. So if we're teaching 2+2, maybe we do it with beat, 1, 2, plus 1, 2, and students can count that. So you can use beat, which is using music. You can use maybe dance. So maybe we move our bodies in certain ways, and we get 2 people up, and then we add 2 more people, and the students can count the bodies. So we're hitting bodily, kinesthetic, musical, linguistic, and logical mathematical. We can do the same with puppetry. It gives a student an opportunity to work themselves designing a puppet. So then you're talking about mathematical, logical, and then that intrapersonal time. And then later on, to create a puppet show, they're using interpersonal skills. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use the arts to answer the question about how do we give multiple representations, multiple types of engagement with our students. Now, whenever we come together to build as a group creatively, it is so important to start with building a safe space. I call, in my work, I call it the sanctuary space. And I tape off, or I use chairs, I tape off part of the room so that students know at any time in our practice they can self-regulate and go to this area to recenter themselves, to utilize their coping skills, and really just take time to prepare to join the group again. And this is always an option for all of my students. I also begin with a creative agreement. This is as a group, our decided rules of engagement. How do we create together? How do we communicate together? So this is an example of a creative agreement that I used in one of my classes. On the left, you'll see a board where my students have shared what they'd like, and on the right, I've transcribed that for you. Now this board, this creative agreement, I leave this up at all times whenever I work with my students to create, because we can always check back in with this board if we begin to lose our focus. And this is an agreement that everyone in the classroom has agreed to. We don't move on unless it's a unanimous choice that we agree to all these things on the board. So an example that they've shared with us is to be respectful, be peaceful, listen, speak kindly, be willing to make good changes. Now, this as a teacher, as a teaching artist, is your opportunity to sort of front load the class. Now, the teacher in the room is, of course, the expert. They know best. So teaching artists, it's really important for you to communicate with the teacher about what sort of ideas they want to see on the creative agreement board. And teachers, if you know that you want the students to have assigned seating when they're creating, or you would like them to utilize certain coping skills, this is the time to put it on the board. Next up, building our story. And this is how we're going to begin, because we can do so many different art forms off of a main theme, a story. Now, teachers and teaching artists, the theme here can be used to support curricular goals. So if your theme is about employability skills, or if you're working with a younger group and your theme is about color recognition, so maybe the colors of the rainbow, whatever will best support your classroom, that's what you want to plug into theme or goals. And try to turn it into a sentence so it's easy to go back to. Right now, bee boards are very popular. I work with early childhood education all the way through transitional youth. And recently, many of my classes pull a bee, so be prepared or be healthy from the bee board, and that becomes the goal that we focus in all throughout the story-making process. Now, characters. If you are working with early childhood education, they probably won't be ready to say they want a pink elephant to be their hero, but they are familiar with other stories. You can pull from Little Red Riding Hood, maybe the wolf in their story meows. We can take these characters and give them ownership of the process by adjusting them. Maybe their Little Red Riding Hood only wears green. We're going to touch more on character creation with older students in a little bit. But now I want to talk about plot. All of your stories will have a beginning, middle, and end. And now with my classrooms, the middle, it should always be the most interesting. So I offer my students a choice. What is the wildest thing that you want to see in our story? Do you want to see a spaceship landing or a great tornado? And whatever they choose, that becomes the middle of our story. That is our work to work out artfully. So do we draw pictures for the great storm, or do we use our bodies to become the spaceship and the sounds? So then we're talking about movement and music, utilizing performing arts and visual arts, and film, video. All of you who have a cell phone also have a fantastic camera. So you can put this in the hands of your students to take video, to make choices about what view they want of the presentation. And later you can pretty easily turn that into a little short film for them. Now, character creation. When you're dealing with older students, and I mean elementary on, they will most likely be able to give you some great ideas for hero, villain, and supporting characters to work off of for your theme. Now, if they're having difficulty, you might want to use art that you've already made in your classroom. This is an example of a young Michigan student who created a night owl. So in a class, if we were figuring out who do we want to be a character, I know the student could bring up their owl and we could take traits from this to help create the characters. For example, if we want an owl to be our hero, we can pull from nature and know that maybe the owl will have a conflict with a raven. We could also pull from movies we've seen before, so like Land Before Time, this dinosaur, or maybe even toys they may have at home and be able to bring in. Whatever they do during their brainstorm, it's important that we offer them varied ways to experience these choices. So something visual is very important, or tactile. We can even begin to assign sounds or movements based on how we observe these possible character choices. You know, and this choices, does our dinosaur have a high voice or a low voice? Does our alien move side to side or only hop? These are some of the choices that we can give our students, and whenever we make a choice, we vote. Now, voting is going to look differently in every classroom. we meet the students where they are at. So whatever assistive devices your students are using to communicate, or if you want to just scan the room and let them gesture, however that looks, when they are voting on the process, we are answering the UDL why. Why should the student be engaged? Why should they be invested? It is the voting of choices that gives them ownership of what they're doing and makes sure the process stays student-led. Now, here's the resource page, and if you are working with younger students, so early childhood, maybe early elementary, Epic Digital Library is a great resource. It's a digital library for young students, and if you are a teacher and you use your education email, they will give you a free account. So that's so many free books that you can read to them and really begin to set up these characters and how you might use these stories to support other skills. If you have a classroom where your students have access to computers or iPads, VoxVote is a fantastic resource. It gives you an immediate vote for your whole room for anyone who chooses right away on your computer screen. So it really takes down the time that might happen if you have to count every person in your room. If you'd like to learn more about the UDL, Universal Design for Learning, I suggest going to the CAST website on the resource page. If you'd like to learn more about the theory of multiple intelligences, check out the link I provided there. So this concludes Inclusive Arts Education Strategies to Engage Learners of All Ages and All Abilities. And thank you so much. All right, I guess I'll give it back to you. Thank you, Emily.
All right.
Okay.
Give me one moment. And okay, so we have now reached the question and answer portion of our webinar. If you haven't already, now is the time to enter a question into the Q&A box or raise your hand. And to get started, so one question, it says, love the examples of multiple intelligences. Do you have a recommendation on a specific number of art forms represented for a lesson?
Yes, it completely depends on the room. So in the very beginning, we talked about our students' individual interests and where they lie. That will tell you how many art forms you need to bring in. Now, some things like theater are really good for hitting a lot at once. If you use theater, you're going to use visual arts and storytelling. There will be design elements involved. So that's probably my favorite to go to for a classroom. But if you find that your class also loves to dance and they also love puppetry, I suggest listening to your students, listen to the room.
Great. I have a question. Any tips for breaking a tie when building a story?
Breaking, oh, so you mean, yes, I understand. So very often I go into classrooms, and a great example I have, most recently, we were building a space story, and I had one student who liked the idea of a character from Doom, and whenever we started to talk about other things that our character could do, the student it was very important to him that we kept the Doom integrity. And so, and for this student, when he began to see how the story grew, he actually came into the classroom and thanked everyone. I mean, it was a big deal for us. Often when students see how the story grows and that it is cool, it is enjoyable, and they want to be a part of it, those ties will dissolve on their own. But other things that I do in my classrooms is I allow people to bring in ideas, not names. So if you wanted to use a character like from Caillou, then you need to explain to me, is the character an astronaut? Are they a student? And that's how we identify them. So sometimes breaking the name so that we're using Littlefoot, but now Littlefoot is a dinosaur. He's not Littlefoot from Land Before Time. We're just using him as an example of our new character. That'll help grow the perception.
Great, and I have one more question. When filming your stories, do you have any ways in which you might incorporate someone with mobility issues or limited mobility?
Yes, yes. So mobility issues and limited mobility. So depending on how their grip is and how comfortable they feel holding a camera, they may need assistance, but they always choose the angle and where it's being filmed from. And so those adaptations are, of course, necessary, but it's about choice. It's about the student being able to decide and be the director in that moment. So make sure that you make it so that they are able to do so, but never take the choice away. And for actually being in the story and moving around, again, you create the adaptation. You know, maybe this part of the story is a close-up, or you create a way for them where they feel comfortable moving in that space. But I'll give you an example. If we are birds, birds don't need to fly with their arms up and down. They can flutter with their eyelashes. They can fly with just moving their fingers. There are lots of physical adaptations we can make so that all of the students are invited to the process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ramona. And with that, that concludes today's webinar. I'd like to ask you, our webinar participants, to keep your window open following the webinar, where the survey will generate on the screen. Your feedback is always appreciated. And thank you for joining us. For questions or comments, I can be reached by email at ectheal@kennedy-center.org or by phone at 202-416-8742. Have a nice day.